Johnny. I'm so glad you're in here so I don't have to talk by myself. All right, so I'm just going to get started. So today the topic is non-speaking and non-verbal. Non-speaking, non-talking or non-verbal, which I am, as you know, I don't like functioning labels, and I feel like labeling people non-speaking or non-talking doesn't help our kiddos. Doesn't help us to advocate for them. But I understand, sometimes those labels are being used. So non-talking and non-speaking are used to describe neurodivergents who are not using verbal channel to communicate. Although I contest that non-speaking and non-talking autistics are actually very, very communicative. So keep that in mind. Non-speaking people are often more communicative and more observant, and they use other ways, other channels to communicate and do the back and forth beautifully. So just because somebody cannot use their verbal communication channel, it doesn't mean that they cannot connect with you and communicate with you. Okay. So nonverbal is a term being used for, I think, for people with complex communication needs. So there you go. Instead of saying my child is nonverbal, say my child needs communication support, or my child has complex communication needs. So hi Ali, thank you for coming in here. So that's more specific, and I think people get it. And then also when you say that my child has complex communication needs, it's also kind of like a prompt for other people, other adults you talk to ask a question back. What does that mean? How can we help your child? Then you can go on and say, because my child needs picture exchange communication system, my child needs Go Talk, or any app, and so when you're being specific in describing your child's communication needs, hi Melanie, then you can also engage and educate others. So stay away from functioning labels when it comes to describing how much our child can talk, because talking is different than communication, totally different, right? So I've worked with a lot of people who are hyperverbal, meaning they just talk nonstop, and but they still don't understand how to communicate. They don't read other people's communication intents, and they really have a hard time connecting with others and exploring other people's interests. So the reason that we connect with others and have conversations, because we know that our interest is different than other people's interests, and neurotypicals are born with that innate drive to just connect with others, and they're interested about other people's interests and wants, and it's different. They understand that people are separate than us, and it's different, and it's interesting to explore. That's why we have conversations, right? And for autistics, because autism is a neurotype, so that's how we should define autism. Autism is a neurotype, and one of the areas that autistics are different in is they're wired differently within social communication. We have social communication differences, right? Okay, so let's talk about research a bit in science and comparing neurotypicals and neurodivergence. So I like to give you some background in what researchers have found in neurotypical babies, and also babies who will later develop autism. So when researchers look at neurotypical babies, they find that these babies are very, very interested in their primary caregiver's facial expression. So when we hold our babies, actually holding it in our, arms at arm's length, or maybe we're changing the baby's diapers, that's actually a perfect link with our for our newborn babies to be able to look at our faces. Hi everyone. And when they're newborns, they're attracted to the contrast, like our hairlines, our eyes, just sort of the different shapes on our faces, even though everything's probably blurry when you're a newborn, but they're attracted to that. So that's why, as parents with our newborn, we tend to hold them up here. I don't know if you can see me, like hold them up here and then hold them at arm's length here. That's a perfect length for parents to begin making that connection and helping the baby to just have neural connections and learn from us. And neurotypical babies seek that. Very, very interested in their parents' facial expressions from very, very early on. Now, there's also another study looking at comparing babies who will later develop autism versus neurotypical babies. And the difference is that for neurotypical babies, it doesn't matter what interesting object you hold in front of them, like a flashlight or something interesting, a toy. The baby will look at the object presented, shared object, and then shift back to the parents' faces, because it seems like they sense that the most interesting and valuable information actually comes from my mom's or my dad's facial expressions and the social communication they provide to me in the moment, right? So that's why you'll see that shifting from the object to parents' social cues and so on. It just goes back and forth. Shifting is very, very easy, right? So for autistic babies or toddlers, we see lots of videos that they're playing with toys, or just they're doing their stimming. They're just processing sensory information and really be in it so much. The sounds, the colors, like everything, because they see the world in its full glory. Autistic kids, right? It's wonderful. And that really absorbs their attention and their energy, mental energy, and they're all in it 100%. And then for their parents, it's very hard to enter that at the beginning. So parents always tell me that it's very hard to engage with my toddler. I call his name and he doesn't respond to me. I want to play with toys, but it's very hard to even show how the toy works, right? So that's what happens with autistic babies and toddlers. They look less at parents' facial expressions or social cues, and they're also much more interested in just objects and sensory stimuli, and that's much more interesting for them as opposed to monitoring the world and definitely monitoring other people. So that we know that the differences with these two groups. There's also an interesting study called the visual cliff experiment. You can look it up on YouTube. So this is an old study where they built this table and there is a drop off. They use plexiglass and the babies were asked to crawl on the table, and at one point visually it looks like there's a drop, right? It's still safe because it's plexiglass and it just looked like visually. So the moms were asked to wait at the opposite end of the table, and for every single neurotypical baby, when just about they reach that drop off, they would stop and look at their mom's faces. If mom's face told us, I'm worried, don't, just using facial expression to communicate that's dangerous, it's worrisome, then every single neurotypical baby would stop and go back, but they would just stop right there. However, if moms were using happy faces, safe faces, all the babies cross over. So it's a very interesting study. Look it up on YouTube. It's Dr. Tronic's visual cliff experiment. Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming in and joining me today. So neurotypical babies and toddlers, because they were able to monitor their parents' social cues, if you want to call it that, from very, very early on, right? They just look at their parents' faces all the time. And if you look at babies and toddlers in general, when they want your attention, they don't take their eyes off of your face. Now, autistics, because the wiring are different, they're not necessarily monitoring social cues easily because they're busy processing their sensory input. So some of parents here might remember with your autistic kids, when they were little, you were always busy making your baby feel comfortable. Maybe the baby was fussier, difficult to soothe, didn't sleep well. So you were always like really working hard to figure out how to soothe the baby, and the baby was difficult to soothe. Not all babies, but I hear that a lot, right? So what happens with autistic babies and their parents, that sender receiver, the feedback that happens, the interaction between a parent and a baby, that could happen in like sender receiver, like a loop, because you can be in sync when the baby is clean and regulated. You can do this peekaboo games, you can do tickles, you can make faces, and the baby responded in a productive way, smiling, cooing, laughing, like cracking up, babies cracking up. I love those video clips of babies, right? So it's easy to do that, to interact with them, and it feels productive, it feels light afterwards, as opposed to autistic and babies and toddlers. Parents had to work very, very hard to engage, and even if they do engage, it's very, very short-lived, and it's very hard for autistics to maintain that social interaction, to think about sender receiver for a long time, because it's hard for them, because the wiring is different, right? Their mind has to work in overdrive to figure out to read the social cues and also to respond, right? So the wiring is different socially, so think about that. I'm looking at my notes. Autistic kids, they monitor less because a lot of them are very focused on their internal thoughts or things that they're very, very interested to do in the moment. And it's hard for them to shift to other people. They're very focused on preferred activities. You see photos of kids lining shoes up, like all the toys or the animals, or watching TV. Hi guys. So it's very focused on that. That is their strength, by the way. Their ability to be so precise in the things that they love to do, right? Hi Melanie. Yeah, so that is their strength. There's a place for that kind of strength in this world. So don't break it, don't mess it up. Just be gentle with it. I would sit down with them and play, like line things up with them and just slowly incorporate small variations. Okay, so what happens when babies and parents are out of sync, right? And it's not autism specific, actually. It could be any global developmental delay. It could be kids who have apraxia. Yeah, so a lot of kids actually, they have great eye contact, but because maybe there is I'm not a speech therapist, so maybe they're developing apraxia. So it's just they get the input that, but the output is very, very difficult. But they're very, very observant. But they're very quiet. I think I was one of those kids who just played for hours and hours by myself. But because I didn't have speech difficulties as a co-occurring condition, my speech eventually developed, right? And then we have kids who are just very active, like the Energizer Bunny, like you blink and they disappear, or they knock something down or spill something, so you have to be very, very, very vigilant. So in both situations, both type of kids, it is hard for mom and dad to just be able to interact without raising our voices, right? So when we raise our voice, then we get their attention. So in an atypical interaction, in interactions between neurodivergents and their parents, it's very out of sync, meaning parents become very anxious because the child doesn't respond, right? You call their names plenty of times and they just ignore you, or you show them a toy and they're not even looking at you, they're looking straight past you. So it's very, very difficult, and our interaction is out of sync, and you can't learn from them and they can't learn from you. So imagine growing up, because your wiring is different, that you don't realize that I have the potential to be guided by my parents, right? If I just once in a while monitor mom and dad, it's actually productive. I will learn something. There's good information for me there to use, right? And also for the parents, very immediately you fall back into bad habits of repeating yourselves, over prompting, doing hand over hand. Your interactions become very, very static, repetitive and static, and close-ended. Your communication becomes close-ended. I say that the parents very quickly overcompensate. So no longer it's actually a two-way interaction, it's just one way, because it's very hard for our child to figure out ways that our child can respond. So parents also overcompensate by overly using names and repetitions and buying more stuff. So as parents, we think, oh, my child is really loves train or loves these noise making toys, toys that you just make a ton of noise, or books. Some books are like that too, and so you just keep buying stuff. When you keep buying objects, the more objects and things you put in front of your child, you're competing with those objects, right? Plus, when we're nervous, when we're anxious as parents, we actually raise our voice, and that's scary for our kids, for our atypical children, right? So we actually have to do the opposite. We have to know, what do we do as moms and dads when we are anxious, and then go the opposite. So if you're loud like me, you get louder. When you're anxious, you actually have to catch yourself and just slow down, and then use softer tone of voice, so you create a contrast, right? And then remove the bells and whistles if you want to practice building mutual engagement, because I think toys are great, but it depends on the toys. And if you see that your child gets really overwhelmed with a lot of the bells and whistles, and you're trying to connect with them. So we're talking about, how do we as parents build the connections? You have to simplify. and we really have to change the way you normally approach them, because if they tend to look down when you approach them, there's something in the way you approach them. So maybe your energy is telling our kid that it's nervous energy. So you have to really kind of look inwards and gauge. Okay, let me just look at some of your questions. I'm sorry, I didn't want to lose my train of thought, so I'm gonna look at some questions or comments here. Hi everyone, thank you for being here. Okay, so somebody's waiting assessment for almost 3-year-old daughter. Okay. Okay, so there is a comment about not sure if their daughter is autistic. Okay, so I think for girls, the signs would be different. A lot of girls and women, we are very social, so it's different. We can use eye contact and be social, although sustaining it's hard for us. So we need breaks. I think that's it in general for autistics. So don't be confused when your kids are young. It's a really good time to help them experience the world. So remember, our brain is plastic. Our brain continues to change depending on the experiences we expose the brain to. So I think attachment, mutual engagement. So you build those, slowly. And we can't pay professionals to do this, you guys. I'm not saying don't do therapy, especially if your children have co-occurring conditions such as sensory processing disorder, apraxia, dyspraxia, if they have feeding difficulties, if they have severe motor issues, if they have these other things. Clearly, right? You need to engage with good professionals. But in terms of how do I connect with my child, only you, mom and dad, can have to slowly figure that out. So we already talked about just slowing down and removing distractions. A lot of times when you have a lot of stuff at your home that's competing, it's just harder for your child to know that your intention is to connect. It takes longer, it's harder. And then also for parents, you just automatically feel like my child's not interested, so I just move on to something different instead of just gently showing, right? So don't repeat yourself. Show how things work. So if you have little ones, for example, just pick her up and show her, oh, this is how you push the button to make the coffee machine, for example. I used to do that a lot with my son. So for parents here whose kids are resistant, they're into their own world, so you just show them what you do, the small things like making tea, making coffee. I'm trying to think what else. Putting things together. Maybe if you use fruit juice, show them this is the button to push it. They don't have to do anything for you. So that's the other advice I can give parents. Do not make demands, because when your kids have co-occurring conditions and you hire professionals to work with you, everything is performance based. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next topic. That what if you outsource to, like, you have speech therapists, occupational therapists, and all these wonderful people who is there to help you figure out how to develop the skills related to speech development, right? So think about it like this, you guys. Reward-based language practice of any sorts, of any kind, it's going to be hard for the person to generalize. So when I was doing behavioral programs, I was taught to do verbal imitation. This is how I was told, okay, this is how you make autistic kids talk. And I didn't know any better. This was 30 years ago. So of course we would do like dangle the right carrot M&Ms or whatever, or music, toys, and I would say say mama. So when they make sounds, any kind of sounds, then we would try to get those sounds under stimulus control, right? And then we would shape the sounds into syllables and later into words. And later we would pair up, let's say the child can say mama. We would show the picture of mama and pair it with that particular word that they can already imitate and say. There's a whole progression. But of course, everything was, the child was given a reward along the way. Now, here's the thing for autistics. They do process information differently. They learn the fastest if it's has repetitions and visual base, just because they have such a strong static abilities and have great memory. But what they're lacking is context, right? So like for neurotypicals, when somebody says something or when they look at a picture, or they can imagine the context, understand the context. For autistics, it doesn't come naturally for us to just really understand the context. Why is mom saying that to me? Or what's going on in these social situations? I a lot of times have to ask my husband, okay, what do you mean by that? Context doesn't come to us naturally, which is why teaching kids, it's fine if you want to use some pictures, but you have to provide context. How do we provide context? We use all of our channels of communication, you guys. Facial expressions, use different kinds of vocal inflections, use our body orientations, use gestures, exaggerate your gestures if possible, but do it in a mindful way. Don't just throw everything at them and it becomes scary for our kids, right? So context come from us as parents, and this is why it's very hard to have other people do this and practice this, because at home we have our meal times, play times, waking up times, changing the diapers, bath times, all these wonderful opportunities that are safe for our kids. And those are really little moments that we can practice connection. Connect first, then you can work on the interactions. I want you to think about it as a sender. What communication signals are you sending to the child? And are you telling your child that, I have something to share with you and it's interesting and I like it. I want you to look at it just for a bit. There's only parents. I have goosebumps now because it's very hard for non-parent to get this. We love our babies so much that only us can make the time to do that, right? So regardless of what your homework is from the clinicians you work with, at the end of the day, if we cannot learn to be guide instead of instructor, if our child looks at us as an instructor at home, they're not going to want to do anything with us. They don't want to practice all these things that they're supposed to practice with us, because they have apraxia, they have other things that they just have to improve, right? So I think for us parents, it's really important to understand, are we a good guide or not? Non-speaking, non-talking people are very communicative. Non-verbal people, they're all the same. I just don't like this, non that, because they're just human beings wanting to be loved. So as parents, we have to throw normal out the window, and we have to see them as a young person trying to figure out how to be in this world, right? And why not create opportunities throughout the day that that for them to feel like it's safe to come out and I want to be with my parents. And then you figure out the communication part. So for example, I'm trying to think of something. Okay, so here's a static interaction I want to show you. Okay, so here's the static interaction. Like, what is this? And you expect a child to say cup, right? Is it hot or cold? You expect the child to say hot, right? What's in it? And they expect the child to respond, mommy's coffee. Those are static interactions. When I was doing behavioral therapy, I was taught to do all those things, right? Question, answer. It's like an interview. It's not even an interview because it's just close-ended questions, or it's an instruction. We fall back into instructing all the time in a repetitive way, and we do it so fast so our kids don't have time to process, right? So now let's use the same situation but do it in an engaging, inviting way for your kids to respond and keep it up with the back and forth, right? So let's say you just hold, this is what I would do. I would just hold up the cup in front of the child, my kid, and just smile. Oh, this smells so good, and smile and just wait. Count to yourself for 10 seconds. Just wait. That's your mantra. You interact, you count to yourself for 10 seconds and wait. I want you to keep your eyes on your child. And maybe your child would come and look, what's mommy, that's your child sending back, responding with her own social cue, right? Then you do the same thing. Oh, look, see? And I would touch it. I was like, it's warm. I like warm coffee, right? And maybe your child would put her hand, or you can gently, if your child's calm, put her hand on here, right? So you get the idea. Communication, over 80% of our communication is very much multi-channel, right? We use all of these channels, over 80% of it, to communicate our communication intents to our partner, right? So, but when kids were being taught to respond in a behavioral way and with like the right carrots, it's very dangerous, more so for kids who have apraxia, kids who have other kinds of difficulties, because it's so much harder for them to produce the output. And what's in it for them to just spontaneously use what they know if there's no carrot with other adults and other kids? That's the danger. Right? So how do we get our kids to want to use the skills that they can do? It's through this interaction. So they care about being with you. They care that you understand them. They want to come to join you for us parents. So it's very, very important. Okay. Yes. So neurotypical kids also totally ignore us. So neurodiverse children ignore more. They're not ignoring you. So the question was, why is this topic was ignoring? So neurotypical kids do ignore, of course. It's their job. But the function of what seems like ignoring us as parents is the function is different. It's a coping mechanism for them to block out the world, because it's just the sensory stimuli is very overwhelming. So they just look down or do things that calms them down. So that's the function, as opposed to neurotypical kids. When they ignore it, it's really because they're not ready to transition, right? So it's different. So that's ignoring. Is there any other question? Hi, Anita. There are parents raising their voice and think it's very... Okay, so raising your voice, it's not good in the long run. Of course, we get immediate attention when we raise our voice. As parents, you do the best that you can. If there are days that you just don't have much energy and you end up, I've been there, like raising my voice and the windows are open. I'm like, oh my God, my neighbors can hear me. We're all human beings, but in general, it's not a good way to connect, right? So be mindful of it. So we have to do the opposite. So a good way to do this is to videotape yourself, right? And when you videotape yourself, you can see if you talk too loudly, like me, you talk too fast, like me, or if you just like to throw things at your kid. Do this, do that, do this. It's like all over the place. So they're very, very confused. So that's not a good way. We have to slow down. We have to be very, very gentle. Okay, so we talk about contacts and how we provide contacts. When you have older kids, providing contacts meaning telling them when you get their attention, grandma's waiting for us, so we have to leave in 10 minutes. Please be ready. So that's really important, providing contacts for older kids, because when you say, oh, I told you 10 minutes, it's time to, it just doesn't work. And also, okay, so this is going back to teaching, but doing it in a repetitive way with rewards, because what you're gonna have is somebody who has a lot of like knowledge accumulation, but if they don't know how to apply the knowledge, it's not going to be helpful. Like for me, I get lost a lot, and I'm very thankful for a GPS on my phone, right? But I still have to be regulated in order to pull over and turn it on. You see, so our jobs as parents is to develop that mindfulness, that resilience in our children through our mutual engagement, just a little bit over time, so that we can help our children to apply what they have learned. Otherwise, we just keep paying people to do this and that, and it doesn't stick, because it just stays in the therapy room, doesn't it? So it's very, very important to keep this in mind. Okay, so knowledge accumulation is very limited. Let's see. Yes, I think I already talk about everything. Let me just check if there's any other questions that... Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad this is helpful. Oh, thank you, Leah. I got a haircut. I was so happy. Last haircut this year was in January, and yesterday was good. I got lucky. Okay, I want to tell you some books. I hope these books are still available. These are called I Love You Rituals, and I'm going to post this along with the recording, by Becky Bailey. So I love this book, I Love You Rituals, because it gives parents ideas of how to play little things, like play games with your hands, sing songs, It's very helpful for an Asian mom like me, because my parents were very, they were very focused on performance, so I don't remember playing so much with my parents, but books like this help to give some ideas. So I Love You Rituals. I have 3 books to recommend. The second one is great for maybe parents of a little bit older kids, like 4 and up. So this is a book called Declarative Language Handbook. It's written by my friend Linda Murphy. So this helps parents to really shift from using instructions, repetitions, instructions or close-ended questions, to just sharing. We call that experience sharing language, right? How to use more declaratives. You want your children to be engaging with you. The first step is for us as parents to be engaging with them as well. So this book is a great cheat sheet highly recommended. And then the last book, if we have any clinicians or therapists here, I thank you for being here, because I know you love what you're doing and you're having an open mind. So I really appreciate all the clinicians here. So if you like to read, this one is called Joint Attention, Communication, and Other Minds. There's a section also in there that talks about how the wiring is different, how and why the wiring is different for autistic people. So it's not a new book, so the language might be like kind of old-fashioned, but if you like to read, this is a good one. So I will post these books. And somebody mentioned Conscious Discipline, so that's good. Okay. Well, thank you guys. Thanks, Melanie. Melanie is here. She runs a great Facebook group, Autistic Grandma on Facebook. Come follow her. And then my friend Leah is here. She runs a great Facebook group called, and I love it, Labels Go on Soup Cans. Autism is a diagnosis. So that's the name of her Facebook group. It's great. So parents, therapists here, learn from autistics. It's the best way if you have an autistic child or if you work with autistics. So that's my last message. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.